Hey guys, welcome to Mic It Up. Today we're going to be continuing our conversation of the top 3 threats facing the mattress industry. You're not going to want to miss this last one. Stick around.
Welcome to Mic It Up with GoodBed.com's Jeff Cassidy.
So when that's the case, it becomes harder just psychologically to make a change.
And Mike Magnuson.
If you're doing those things, you can be competitive long term.
Just when you thought these number-crunching data lovers couldn't get any nerdier, they started a podcast.
And I know this is pretty controversial, but this is why we're having a podcast, right?
But if you want to be smart about how the mattress shopping journey is changing and what retailers and manufacturers should be doing about it, well then, man, have you ever found your people? Because right now, it's time to mic it up.
Mic it up can be... Yeah, mic it up is going to take on... It's going to have a whole bunch of different meanings as a verb to mic it up. That'll evolve over time. I think there's lots of verbs.
What do you think?
Well, obviously, screwing up is an obvious. That's obviously the first one that it means.
Yeah, that's what. Well, that's what it already meant.
Yeah,
that's why we named the podcast after that.
We'll see other ones as we go. So let's jump in here. Third threat. Everybody's anxiously awaiting.
I know. They're just so top 3 threats to the industry. If you missed the last episode, we covered why ultra cheap mattresses is threat number 1, and why Amazon, which is coincidentally or not coincidentally the largest purveyor of ultra cheap mattresses, but for its own reasons is a separate and distinct threat number 2. And now today we're going to talk about threat number 3, which is a different breed from those last 2. It is review sites. Now, review sites are... people were pretty surprised the first time I came out and said that review sites were a big threat to the industry, partly because they're thinking, well, aren't you guys a review site? And yeah, we kind of are a review site, but we're a different kind of review site insofar as we really have, when I started this 12 years ago, this was all about providing consumers with a really, truly trustworthy source of information to help them navigate this category. And ultimately, and separately from that, I believed that by doing that, we could also create a way to help good companies get rewarded for all the good things that they do, specifically by adding transparency to this industry in the form of independent, trustworthy information. I believe that would ultimately reward good companies for those good things. And it's probably the only way, I still believe, for good companies to be rewarded for making and selling good products and standing behind them. And so those 2 things have been fundamental to our mission from day one and continue to be fundamental to everything we do today. But along the way, I'd never anticipated that the category we occupy would be joined by an army of spammy sites that are going to call themselves review sites, or that do call themselves review sites, but do not embody any of those same values to the best I can tell. And specifically, they embody some much more deceptive values that are completely abhorrent to me.
One thing to note there, as part of why you started GoodBed, part of that objective third-party information to help good companies succeed, a major piece of that was customer reviews. So the term review site can be confusing because when you say review site, we are the largest platform of customer reviews as it relates to the mattress industry, both products and stores. So we're very much the only review site in that sense. But the review site that you're talking about is something different.
Correct.
So yeah. I think it can be confusing with that because of that word.
And when I started GoodBed, consumer reviews were the only thing we did and the only thing we ever envisioned doing as it relates to reviewing. I had no intention of, as you know full well, you had to drag me kicking and screaming into the idea of reviewing products ourselves because I just felt like it was not our place to be a gatekeeper. I felt like this is up to the consumer to weigh in, and we're going to provide the best platform the world has ever known for collecting and making reviews useful for consumers in this category. So that's what we were about, and it wasn't until we our hand was forced by these guys by coming out. They came out and provided a bunch of really spammy reviews that were essentially disguised sales pitches that to me were very thinly disguised, but to the average consumer were so well disguised that the consumers had no idea that that's what they were. And so we felt compelled that we had to go into this, and that's the history there. But I do feel that we're kind of bearing the lead as it relates to review sites being a threat. We got off on this sidebar because I think it is a relevant thing to clarify up front how we distinguish ourselves from those guys. So with all that said, why are mattress review sites such a big threat to the mattress industry? And to answer that question, we have to first kind of make sure that we're all on the same page about what these review sites are and how they operate, really. And fundamentally, these review sites are just flawed from the beginning because they are built around the notion of declaring a mattress good or bad, which is fundamentally flawed, as well as creating lists of the best mattresses, which again is fundamentally flawed. Now, why are those two things fundamentally flawed? Well, because as probably most people listening to this podcast know, if you're in the industry, you would know that, of course, mattresses are highly personal. The best mattress for you can be terrible for me, and vice versa. So there's no one mattress that's going to be best for everyone, and therefore there's no way for me to provide a rating of a mattress and say, hey, this is really good. Good for who? Good for me doesn't mean good for you. So who is it good for? It doesn't make any sense to give a mattress a universal star rating. Likewise, this is a list of the best mattresses. Best for who? The best for me are different than the best for you. So who is this the best for? It doesn't make any sense. Even if you try to parse it based on like best for side sleepers, best for, couples, best for whatever, that's not nearly enough level of granularity as, again, anyone who's in the industry doing an earnest job of trying to help consumers find the right mattress for them already knows. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But at the same time, this is something that most consumers don't know. They come into this category. They've not thought about this since 10 years ago when they last purchased a mattress. They don't have a rubric for this. They're not educated about mattresses. And they come into it generally trying to apply a lot of the shopping rubrics that they've used successfully in other categories. And one of those, increasingly, has been searching for the best whatever. And they're accustomed at this point to finding lists of those, finding expert reviews of things that will give a product a certain number of star ratings from some quote-unquote expert. And they're accustomed to finding those things very useful. Now, those types of ratings and best lists in other categories, I have found, and you may have found as well, actually can be useful. But they're only useful in the case of products that are a different kind of product, that are non-personal products, meaning products where we kind of all want the same thing out of that product. When it comes to a wireless router, we kind of all want the same thing, right? We all want one that's going to be reliable, it's going to work all the time, it's going to have a good range, it's going to not, your devices aren't going to get kicked off of it, whatever. It's going to be easy to set up. These are all things we all want. There's no personal preference. It's not like, I want a washing machine, but I don't want it to be too fast or get my clothes too clean. I'm more of like the one who wants the clothes less clean than, we all want the clothes to get clean. So somebody Consumer Reports can review a washing machine and give it an assessment of how clean the clothes get that is equally valuable to all of us. It means the same thing. They can then aggregate all these different assessments into an overall rating. And while some features may be more important to me than they are to you, the overall rating still makes some amount of sense. They can kind of tabulate something together that makes sense, and they can put that into a best list. And maybe I'm not maybe everyone shouldn't automatically buy the one that's number one on their list because maybe you have slightly different priorities. But certainly choosing from among the ones that are highly rated with a methodology like that can make some sense. In mattresses, it makes no sense. More than that, because they are oriented around this approach, and because there really is no good way to assess mattresses with that approach, given their personal nature, it leads inevitably that these guys end up becoming pay-to-play recommenders. It's an inevitable outcome of trying to apply that model to a category for which that model does not apply. And as a result, they are basically not recommending products on any kind of basis other than, hey, these guys, this product makes us a lot of money. And they are optimizing everything. Their economics are optimized for that, for how much money they make. Well, guess what that makes them? That makes them a retailer. They're just selling, right? They're telling you they're going to tell you to buy the product that makes them the most money, and then the content is going to be optimized to get you to buy it, so that they make the most money possible. They're a retailer. The only difference is that they are disguised as an unbiased, quote unquote, unbiased review site. And that disguise is what gives them a massive and unfair advantage over retailers and creates a grave threat to retailers. And we are going to talk more about that in some future episodes. But suffice it to say, for now, I'll give you an example of how that creates a grave and unfair advantage for them. If two people are clicking on, if two companies, your company as a retailer, let's say, them as a review site, are bidding on the same keyword, well, they put the word unbiased in their ad. That word is going to give them higher click-through rate on that ad. And Google's algorithm for AdWords is designed to factor in click-through rate as it relates to how much it costs you for that click. So, because Google's algorithm is optimized for their own economics. So Google's trying to decide which ad to show, and that's a function of how much they get for a click and what percentage of people who see that ad click. So if more people see that ad, more of the people who see that ad click on it, they don't have to pay as much for click for the same position. So their ability to use that word unbiased gives them an unfair advantage in that position in the paid search results. Not only that, they have a huge advantage once they get someone to their site. Because again, when someone lands on your site, you say great things and people go, oh, well, yeah, but they're selling. So of course they're going to say that. Someone lands on their site, they see great things and they go, oh, wow, and these guys are unbiased. And they say that, wow, that's really compelling. And of course, they have a higher conversion rate as a result of that. And P.S., because of the fact that they have a higher conversion rate, they can actually afford to bid more, even more for that ad click than you can. So they're getting it both ways. And it all stems from an unfair competitive advantage, an unlevel playing field that is the reality of the current situation. On top of that, there's a whole situation for retailers where these guys are, their one skill essentially is SEO. They don't know, I'd argue they don't know jack about mattresses. Most of them, they don't know, literally, a lot of them don't even have the product. But even the ones that do, it's just a bunch of 20-somethings, how do we regurgitate the marketing claims for this product? Okay, let's do that. Got it. That's not a skill. Their only actual skill is SEO. And not only are they skilled at it, but they're also willing to cut corners and go to break rules deceive customers, and in some cases even do kind of illicit types of things.
What are some examples? What are some examples of that? Or are you going to get into that later?
Oh, well, you're not supposed to buy links with Google, right? Like, you're not supposed to. That's the cardinal rule of Google, because their whole system of credibility is based on the notion that links infer credibility, right? That if someone's linking to you, then that must mean that you are authoritative. And so they aggregate all that link data across all the web. Every link passes some amount of authority. So pages that have a lot of links coming into them have a lot of authority to pass. And so if they pass authority to another page, then anyways, that all gets passed around, kind of a link juice type of a concept. And the pages with the best link juice rank the highest, all else being equal as it relates to the keywords on the page and everything, that matching up with the query that the user entered. But if someone can buy a link, well, that just completely undermines the whole foundation on which Google's algorithm is built, because that doesn't infer any authority at all. That just means you bought it. So if you buy it on the down low, or if you buy it through some kind of back door, like you acquire a company that had a bunch of links that got them under a totally different pretense than you, like they got them because they're a nonprofit, but you're a mattress review site, for profit. That's a totally different. No one was meaning to link to you, a for-profit mattress review site. They meant to link to a nonprofit, doing something very different. But now you own that link. Well, you essentially bought that link, and that's a violation, direct violation of Google's rules. But they're willing to do that. They're willing to break those rules. They're willing to mislead consumers with using .org domains that give consumers the idea that they are in some way a nonprofit themselves. They are willing to sort of, I call it like med washing. They're rinsing their website in like medical terms and medical discussion to kind of give it this patina of credibility that comes from that comes from this discussion of medical type things. So it gives people the sense that, oh, these guys must be really authoritative because they're speaking about these medical terms and these medical topics. It's all BS. It's all just an elaborate sales pitch. But again, they're doing these things. And by the way, like that's also, to me, that's unfair, because as a truly credible, authoritative retailer or seller or person, you're not going to want to do any of those things, and you shouldn't do any of those things. But they are doing those things, and they're benefiting from it, and that, again, is an unfair advantage. So there's all kinds of unfair advantages that, and by the way, going back to the SEO point, this is a critical thing. Because they are willing to cut these corners, and because they do have certain skills in this SEO area, they're outranking retailers, and they're making it in a world where people are starting their journey online, and in many cases completing that journey online without ever visiting a store. They're making it harder and harder for people to ever even find your store at the point in time when they need to find it.
And those things that you mentioned, they're reinforcing to each other, right? So the more links that I get, the more authority I get, the more Google trusts me, which makes it easier for me to rank high. And with the consumer, the higher I rank without appearing as an ad, the more the consumer is predisposed to trust me.
That's true.
So I'm getting the benefit of appearing. I'm also getting the benefit of earning more trust and more believability with my unbiased claim. So
Yeah.
it's like a double whammy.
Yeah, and speaking of double whammies, not only are they outranking retailers in search results, making retailers then harder to find, but every time a consumer lands on one of these review sites, they become incrementally less likely to ever visit a physical store, I believe. Because the second they land on one of those sites, they're getting kind of indoctrinated into this sales pitch without realizing it's even a sales pitch, that they should be buying one of these products that this site covers, which of course The ones that they cover positively are only the ones that they make money from, which are the ones that sell online. And they're getting indoctrinated into this philosophy that ultimately is designed to dissuade them specifically of going to a store and specifically to buy one of these products that this site is touting, which is one of the ones that they can buy online so that this site will make money. So consumers will land on these sites many times, multiple of these sites, and each time they do, it's reinforcing this message that, oh, you shouldn't go to a physical store. So that's another double whammy, if you will. And then I guess the other thing that is worth from the brand standpoint, there's no end. If you have a pay-to-play model, right? Like if the model is the brands that are appearing at the top of this list are the ones that make us the most money. And by the way, some of these guys will try to use a defense like, oh, it's not just the ones, we don't necessarily rank you the highest if you pay the most commission. It's a combination of the commission times what percentage of people who see this list buy that product. That's actually a defense that some of them have used publicly, even in the press. And it's laughable because, well, that's still pay to play. You're still maximizing your own economics. It's just that you're factoring in two criteria that multiply together to give you your ultimate revenue.
Right. And to be clear, a business maximizing its economics, I mean, that's what a business does. So that in and of itself is not bad. It's the doing that in a way that the consumer has no idea that it's actually in the business of doing the unbiased, objective thing the consumer thinks that they're doing.
This is the kind of comment I hear like at a cocktail party, not from someone who's using our website. At a cocktail party, oh, you're in the mattress space. Oh, yeah, I want to talk to you about the mattress I just bought. I know it's so great because it was on the best top of the list for like 5 different websites that I went to. And I have to be the one then at a cocktail party, mattresses are the last thing I want to talk about. So right off the bat, I'm already dreading and hating this conversation. Now I have to break the news to this person that you didn't find the best mattress. You just found the mattress that pays these sites the most money. And that sucks even worse. And so I have to ruin their night. They've already ruined my night. Now I have to ruin their night. It's just terrible. So
and everybody just goes home.
Everyone just goes
Party
home
over.
all pissed and annoyed. It was a terrible party. So anyways, as Jeff pointed out, it's the disingenuous nature that this is not in any way clear. The consumers are presented saying this is the best. These are the best mattresses. We're unbiased. We've tested them. We've come to this conclusion. Trust us. That's what they're being presented with.
But also, it's interesting and unfortunate. I mean, one of the reasons why online brands took off was because of the negative stereotype of the in-store mattress experience. So the sleazy salesman bias, where people, because a mattress is hard to know exactly what it is, nobody, like you said earlier, nobody knows about mattresses because they spend once every 10 years purchasing it. So it's a big unknown, and they know the person in the store is a salesperson who's selling them something.
Yeah.
And so that led to this big bias. That led to people not trusting the mattress retail experience and looking for another option. And that was the online option. And now what's happening is the same exact thing that led the consumers to want another option.
Yeah.
It's just they have no idea.
It's super ironic that this channel that in some ways grew out of the dynamic you just described, where people were distrusting this, what they considered to be like a sleazy sales type of environment. Well, it's super ironic that the sleaziest thing happening right now in this industry, for sure, in my opinion, is these review sites. And by the way, it's way sleazier than anything that was happening previously. It's far sleazier because, I mean, say what you will about the stereotype of the sleazy mattress salesman. Well, at least everyone knew that person was a salesman.
Right.
He didn't try to hide that fact. This is completely worse than that. No question about it. And I want to just come back to this point about the why pay to play also it enhances the threat. Well, because if they're optimized for that, where the highest paying is shown at the top of the list, there's always this opportunity where someone else can pay more, right? Well, that just is a never-ending war of attrition, effectively. Like, there's no brand building left at the end of that. There's just who is. It kind of goes back to the whole like low cost. Who can strip the most cost out of the rest of their value chain? In other words, who can disguise their product for like put less into the product to make it worse, but still look okay. In order to strip as much cost out of the rest of the value chain so that they can leave as much in the value chain for paying these guys. That's where that leaves us. It's a terrible, terrible destination for the industry. And the more powerful these guys get, the more likely a destination that becomes. So this is a huge, huge threat to the industry. And by the way, the other thing we should talk about is how this threat has changed in the past year or so. Like just how the threat has grown from these guys. I mean, they're exploding in numbers. There's now over 140 of these different websites. Can you believe that? 140 mattress review websites? That's just insane. I mean,
you're putting in that bucket Jeff's mattress review site, if I had one. You're counting all those.
I'm counting anyone and everyone that has a website, a domain that is specifically focused on mattresses, that providing reviews. That's what I'm counting.
It's crazy.
So that the category overall, 140 dedicated sites focused on mattress reviews, at least. That's just the ones we've tracked and have on our list. So that's exploding, and it's just insane. The revenue that these sites are collecting, obviously, is exploding. Also, we should add that these guys are becoming more and more well-funded. We've got actually outside capital coming into the category, which is something new, given especially the magnitude of outside capital coming in. And it's coming in from professional investors. Some of the firms that used to be kind of like in the same space that I used to work in fact, have come into this. There's Consolidation being funded here, being portfolios of these sites, and that in itself is a frightening thought. These guys are trying to say, hey, it's not enough for us to have like the number 1 spot or the number 3 spot in the Google search. We want to have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the only way we're going to do that is to have 5 different domains that have effectively the same content. I mean, it's content with the exact same objective, with just different domains that the consumer's not going to know and Google's not going to know are the same company, just spinning the content, a slightly different way in order to dominate that search page. And that's their objective. That's the only objective that one can have in having multiple sites designed to cover the same exact category. I mean, there's literally no other objective you could have. And so they're doing that, and that's going to give them even more power to the extent that they are able to succeed with that strategy. So that's another area.
Right, so think about that. They consolidate a portfolio of these. Imagine that they have 10, and they become better and better at SEO and all the tricky tactics that you talked about. Well, now the consumer, everybody's starting their mattress buying research online, they go to Google, they have no idea that they hit best mattress, and every one of the 10 things that appear are actually one company. Mm-hmm. So in the physical world, it's like what these guys are doing are basically taking up every single storefront at that high traffic spot and pushing your store to where the industrial part of town is, where there's no businesses. So they're taking up, and the consumer is thinking, oh, these are all different stores. I can check all these different stores and get objective information. They don't have any idea that it's all one company.
Yeah. Well, and as an interesting aside, if you're familiar with the media space as I am, there's a long history in our country of actually regulating media to make sure that there's adequate diversity of voices in a market. So that has applied to radio, television, radio ownership, television ownership, newspaper ownership. It's not been allowed for radio companies like Clear Channel to own more than a certain percentage of the listenership in any given market, because they wanted to make sure that there wasn't too much concentration of voice. Like if one radio company bought up every radio station and they just wanted to tell people that like this is the truth, well, they'd be able to tell people that. And in the days of radio, in the radio era, that would have been the only information people were getting, right? Like they specifically came up with rules to say, no, you can't do that. We're going to make sure we have diversity of voice. Well, Google is essentially, the front page of Google is essentially the modern day radio dial. And we're essentially living in a radio era again, except for now it's Google that is the single and sole source of information, at least as it relates to this category, because it is where every consumer starts. And so that is something that in the past the government has actually consciously regulated, and here now it is completely unregulated, and we're seeing the negative effects of that.
Yeah, another thing that that surprised me a little, it doesn't, when you think about the maximizing your returns as a business entity, is that this issue that we're talking about, it's not just the mattress category. It's lots of categories. So that professional investment, private equity investment, and portfolio building is happening across verticals, across industries. So the same company is replicating that same portfolio concept in lots of different areas.
True.
So
it's worth adding, though, that I've asked every person, almost every person I meet who's worked in another category and comes into this category and is familiar with the kind of marketing dynamic in this category today. I asked them the question, how does this compare to other categories you've seen? And to a person, I have never heard anyone tell me that they've come from or ever worked in an industry that is as bad as this category in this particular regard. This is the bleeding edge of spammy review sites is happening in the mattress industry. Congratulations, everybody listening. Anyways, the point is that we are experiencing quite possibly worse than any other industry is experiencing in this particular regard. The other thing, and along those lines, like part of what people are answering when they talk about that is they're talking about the level of deceptiveness that's happening in this category. It's not just that there are review sites, it's the level of deceptiveness of the practices of those sites. And we talked about the black hat stuff, the breaking the rules and cutting the corners and all that. We talked about even things like misrepresenting themselves as nonprofits or charities and things like that to try to trick you into, or the med washing and things like that. But another thing, by the way, is the corporate ties. The ties that are where these review sites in many cases have ties to mattress brands, typically online mattress brands, that are not disclosed, or at least not prominently disclosed as the way they in my opinion, absolutely should be. And in some cases aren't disclosed at all. And that's a whole nother level. I mean, that's almost mind-blowing, because anyone looking at that can see how that's not right. But nonetheless, that is where we are. And so for all of those reasons, it is incumbent on us, we feel, to help the industry see that this is a massive threat. And it is truly an existential one to all involved. And like so many of the other things that we identify, we see, we always see things from the standpoint of both the industry and the consumer. And here again is a case where both sides are injured by this, very much injured. So, in terms of, by the way, what can be done about this, certainly we'll talk more about this, I imagine, in the future, because it's just such a big issue that faces the industry. And But we do think that ultimately educating consumers about these practices, what's happening with these sites, is super important. So we would encourage retailers to help get the word out to consumers about what's happening, and not only through training your salespeople, but also putting information on your website to this effect to help people understand this. Because for that matter, if you don't put it on the web, people may never meet your salespeople. And then even beyond that, PR efforts to help tell this story through the press, I think is going to be needed. So
it's also unfortunate that some of the things that you said, like acquiring nonprofits in order to acquire the link juice and domain authority, that anybody with internet access can pretty quickly find that out if you just do a little digging. So Google obviously can figure that out. If any one of us can figure it out. So why haven't they done something? Or
how there's not a Google search engineer who has figured this out and just wiped these sites off the face of the internet at this point with some kind of, if not algorithmically, then through some sort of manual penalty. How that has not happened is beyond me. How the FTC has been completely asleep at the wheel on this is completely beyond me. It's long since past time for these key gatekeepers to do their jobs and to step in here, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's not about hardcore regulation. It's more to your earlier point. It's just about it's gone too far, and the consumer is really being hurt by it. Like really, really being hurt.
Yeah, well, as far as regulation goes, I'm the last person who wants to invite more rules and more red tape. But again, this is like a game of street ball where, some people are just, punching people in the face. It's just it's flagrant violation of the rules. To not disclose some of these things that are not being disclosed, for example, is crazy. I know what the tests are that the FTC says for disclosure, about what types of things you need to disclose and how prominently they need to be disclosed. And in my judgment, there's just no way you could look at these sites and say that standard is being met. So at some point, where's the repercussion of that? Where's the consequence? Who's going to hold them accountable to that? So,
And the other piece about what can be done is improve the things that we do that are not shady in order for the traditional industry, traditional retailers, to have a better chance at taking some of those slots on the first page of Google.
Well, and that's a great point that we should add here is that this deciding to speak up about this has caused us to, of course, reflect on what could we do to help retailers compete in this environment. What can we do that doesn't involve sinking to their level, that allows us to continue to maintain integrity here in all of this, and allows retailers to maintain their integrity in all of this. And one of the things that we are going to be doing is helping retailers get reviews from consumers, right? That's the original third-party validation, because fundamentally what these review sites, the gap they're filling in the market is that consumers want third-party validation, right? Like that's clear from, they search for reviews, they search for ratings, best mattress, comparisons, whatever it is they're searching for, it's all about third-party validation. Is hugely valuable in this category. So that's what gives these guys the opportunity to do the deception that they do. But the original form of third-party validation, as we've talked about, is consumer reviews. So if we can help those retailers get reviews onto their sites, collect reviews from their customers, that's a way that retailers can compete successfully and with integrity and provide consumers with information that really is helpful to them, that also helps their sites, to your point, stand out more in Google results and win on that battlefield too. So there's a lot of problems we can help solve for retailers with that. So we are taking our platform and making it available to retailers, and we're building tools to allow it to be even more useful in those ways. And so that's something super exciting that we can't wait to share with more of you. And then for that matter too, we should also mention that we're creating even more ways for retailers to stand out for people who are on Goodbed. We're creating ways for people, for retailers, for consumers who are shopping on Goodbed. We're creating more ways for retailers to get discovered in the context of the shopping that they're doing on our site. So that's, again, something that we look forward to talking with more of you about. If you're not already connected with us and aware of those things, then definitely reach out and we will bring you in the loop. We'll be rolling out some new things in the first part of this year.
And to the existential threat piece of this, our whole business is based upon integrity, honesty, and trustworthiness. And our personal values, that's what our personal values are. So we will never do those shady things. So therefore, we can't compete on those shady things. So we are completely in the same boat. Like with traditional retail, if it puts traditional retail out of business, it's also putting Goodbed out of business.
No doubt about it. No,
so
we're all in. Our chips are in the middle of the table. There's no question. Yeah. We've said, hey, we're gonna basically get the industries back, and hope that they get ours, and hope that together we pull through this successfully. But yeah, if the industry goes down in flames, so will we, for sure. So we couldn't be more aligned.
Yep.
So there we go. I think that's another episode of Mic It Up in the can here.
Although we still need to continue the Mag's invention of podcasting, and I think we were at Adam Curry.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So in our last episode, we were at the point in the story where I had anticipated podcasting would be something along the lines of podcasting would be coming, kind of short form spoken word audio that could be consumed asynchronously in some sort of mobile device. That's what I was looking for. It eventually was invented, named podcasting. I got connected immediately with the people who were kind of at the forefront of that at that time, which was 2003, 2004. By early 2005, I had signed a term sheet with the leader at the time in that space, really kind of one of the first companies to be created in this podcasting space, which was co-founded by a guy named Adam Curry, an MTV VJ from the 1980s who had refashioned himself a podcasting guru. And we had signed an exclusive term sheet to fund his business on behalf of the private equity firm I was working for at the time. And that was no small feat. Again, I talked about this last time, but to convince my partners, who were kind of more of the old school, they come from cable and radio and more traditional media backgrounds. So to convince them that this thing podcasting, which 12 months earlier hadn't even been a word, was going to be like the thing we should invest in was no small feat, and yet they got on board with it. They saw the opportunity, so I was pleased as a young guy. I was pleased with that, and I went at that point in time. It coincided with spring break. My family and I went on vacation, but I continued to listen to Adam Curry's podcast while I'm on vacation, because it was, I was deeply invested in the space, and he was the leading podcaster in the space. And here we had this, I had just signed a term sheet with him to back his company that he was starting, and so keeping posted on his podcast as well. And I'm listening to it a day or two into my vacation, and he's talking about how he's flying to San Francisco. And he's going to take some meetings in San Francisco. And then the next day, he's talking about how he's headed down to Sand Hill Road. And And immediately, I mean, my ears had already perked up when he said he was flying to San Francisco, but when he said he's going to Sand Hill Road, where all the venture capital firms are in the Bay Area, I thought, what the heck is he doing? We've got an exclusive term sheet that we've signed. There's no reason to be going to Sand Hill Road. The story continues, though. He continues this in his podcast, how he says, so we walk in. Our first meeting is with Kleiner Perkins, and we had a great meeting with them. And then we had a meeting with Sequoia. That's another really famous venture capital firm, arguably the two most famous venture capital firms at that time. And those went great. And I'm livid at this point, but I'm also sitting at a pool in Mexico, not exactly well equipped this time to do something about this. And, so I'm emailing, I'm calling, I'm trying to get people from my firm to figure out what's going on while I'm on vacation. Well, long story short, I come back from vacation. No one's able, they went radio silent on us. By the time I get back from my 1 week vacation, they've received a term sheet from Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia together to fund them with even more money at a better valuation. So, at that point, I could have. We had legal recourse.
Well, couldn't you have? Yeah, couldn't you?
We had legal recourse, but at the same time, it was only a term sheet. It wasn't a formal. That's a rather informal document in the world of finance. There is some legal recourse to exclusivity in that regard, but it's not like the remuneration is super high for violating that particular thing. So it was a question of, is it worth pursuing that vis-a-vis the costs, not only legally, but from the standpoint of whatever business relationship you might have. So it was...
Did they give you the opportunity to participate in that deal
not.
Together with Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia?
No, we were completely shut out. And, in the one respect, it was hard for me to fault them in the sense that, again, these were the two most prestigious private venture capital firms on the planet, and they were giving them better terms than we gave them. But from an integrity standpoint, to go around, to have signed that with us, and then to go ahead and do that so brazenly was just obviously very scuzzy thing to do. And so I was pretty disappointed.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, you should feel good about the fact that your instincts were right, but don't give away any of the rest.
Okay.
We'll see what happens longer term.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Next time.
All right. So on that note, we will wrap up this episode of Mic It Up. We thank you for listening as always. And we remind you, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe. You can subscribe through whatever podcast platform you prefer as well. Leave us a review. We'd love it. If you could share your feedback as well, it also helps other people find this podcast. So thanks for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode.